No matter how hard I try, I can't get hot enough. Everything that I put inside this thing either explodes or burns. All this hard work for nothing. The speed controller is totally dead. There's a huge crack. Oh my god. So I don't know what I was expecting, but doing pottery yourself is way harder than I thought. The project all started when I saw there was space for an opposite stance to the original quote from Gustav Mahler. I found that the ashes should not always be left behind, as they can still serve a purpose. This was the whole philosophy behind each part of the project: to reuse and to make from scratch. The phoenix also played a large part in the project, as it represents both usefulness of ashes and circular economy. Pottery became my entire project, as it perfectly represents tradition. The various techniques of pottery tie into all the other aspects of the quote. Pottery is an art, but also a craft, since the primitive era. My idea was to attempt raku, which is a Japanese technique in which the pot is heated red hot and then quenched into an organic material of your choice, to create a pattern on the pot. I was going to imprint a feather onto my pots, but this did not work, as I couldn't get the pots hot enough. My parents, however, had sent me feathers from a female peacock that their neighbor happened to have. This was perfect. I now had huge feathers that resembled that of a phoenix. All I had to do was to imprint it manually into the clay while it was still wet. I could still use my kiln as its original purpose, which is to simply fire my pots. I say simply, but this takes many hours. The pots need to be absolutely dry, the heat needs to be very gradual, otherwise the pots will either crack or explode or burn. There's so many things that can go wrong at this step. Here you see the feather still in the clay, and here you see what it looks like after the feather is removed. It's a very shallow imprint and not very visible, but I have an idea of how I can make it better. My plan is to take some of the feathers and burn them, creating ashes, which I can then mix into a slurry to create a sort of dye that I can then brush the pots with carefully, so that the raised parts of the pot will be dark while the crevices will be white or light colored, which will make the feathers stand out a lot better. I use a brush with the slurry and dry the brush almost completely, so that only a small amount of the slurry will go onto the pot so that it does not enter the crevices. Here you can see the finished product. The feather is almost fossilized on the surface of the pot, and the brushwork really elevates it and shows all the finer details and gives it a lot more texture. I used brown clay for this pot, but I also used normal clay for other pots, which did require firing. These do not. This is an example of the normal clay from up close with a macro lens. This really shows the finer detail that can be appreciated over time when you spend a little bit of time with these pots. The ashes really show through. It's almost as if the surface has been burned, and this is really the effect I was looking for. I made many pots, way too many pots to show each one from up close, but here's an overview of all the pots that I found good enough to show. All these pots have their counterpart of a pot that failed, that exploded, that burned. It took many, many trials, and this is what I have.